Today, we're going to explore the apes and primate divergence during the Miocene Epoch. The Miocene Epoch, spanning approximately 23 to 5.3 million years ago, marks a profound and dynamic era in the evolutionary history of primates, universally recognized as the Age of Apes. In this explainer, we will talk about the intense adaptive radiation and subsequent environmental pressures that defined this epoch, fundamentally shaping the lineages of Old World monkeys and hominids.
All right, let's get into it. We're starting at what was truly the peak of ape evolution, a time so incredibly rich with different species that it's known as the Golden Age of Apes.
You have to picture a very different planet. The early Miocene was much warmer and wetter, with a really stable climate. This created these vast, dense forests that stretched across huge parts of the globe. It was basically a paradise for apes, giving them everything they needed to thrive and spread out. And this incredible explosion of diversity has a name: the hominoid adaptation radiation. You can think of it as evolution just kicking into overdrive. Apes weren't just multiplying, they were branching out into an amazing array of new forms, each one finding its own ecological niche. They expanded out of Africa and into Asia, giving rise to the Civipithecines, who are the ancestors of today's orangutans. And at the same time, another group, the Dryopithecines, found a home in the huge forests of Europe.
But these golden ages rarely last. The planet itself began to change, entering a period of massive transition. And the driving force behind it all was global climate change.
This timeline really shows you just how dramatic that shift was. The epoch kicks off warm and stable. But then, right around 14 million years ago, we hit a major turning point. Global temperatures started to fall, and they fell significantly. By the end of the Miocene, the world was a much cooler, drier, and more seasonal place. This was a complete overhaul of Earth's ecosystems. And this comparison really puts it into perspective. The world that the apes knew, these huge, continuous forests, started to break apart. They became fragmented patches of woodland, separated by expanding grasslands. So the stable, warm, wet world, with tons of resources, turned into a landscape where food was much harder to find and much more spread out. This massive change in the environment put an incredible amount of pressure on every primate species out there. It was a classic case of adapt or die. The old rules for survival just didn't apply anymore. For the apes that had dominated for so long, the consequences were, catastrophic. Their golden age came to an abrupt end, triggering a massive decline in their diversity and their numbers. It's a simple but brutal equation. As the forests dwindled, so did the apes. Their entire world, these massive interconnected forests, was literally crumbling. And with that fragmentation, most of the incredible diversity of ape species just vanished. The reasons are all connected. It started with habitat loss, as the forests shrank. That, of course, led to fierce competition for the food and territory that was left. For a lot of these species, the climate was just changing way too fast for evolution to keep up. And the apes that had expanded into the northern latitudes of Europe and Asia, they were hit the hardest. You can see the power shift so clearly here. As the ape dynasty was collapsing, another group, the Old World monkeys, really started to take off. Their advantage was that they weren't as specialized. They had a more flexible diet and could reproduce faster, which made them much better suited to this new, less predictable world. The Age of Apes was giving way to the rise of monkeys. But the story doesn't end there. It's not just about extinction, because out of this environmental crisis, a totally new and game-changing lineage of ape emerged from the survivors in Africa.
And we call this new lineage the hominins. These were African apes, but they had a crucial, revolutionary new trick up their sleeve: bipedalism, the ability to walk upright on two legs.
Now, walking upright wasn't just some neat party trick. It was a powerful tool for survival in this changing world. With the forests broken up into isolated patches, being able to walk efficiently across the open ground between them was a huge advantage. It meant hominins could exploit resources from both the woodlands and the growing savannas. So while their tree-dwelling relatives were struggling, these bipedal apes were actually thriving. And just let that sink in for a second. Our entire evolutionary story, it all began with a small group of surviving African apes that started walking on two legs. This single adaptation laid the foundation for everything that was to come, leading directly down the path to us.
So this brings us to the final chapter of the Miocene, This is where we see the evolutionary splits that create our closest living relatives and ultimately the beginning of the human lineage itself.
As the Miocene was winding down, the last major branches of the great ape family tree were forming. First, around 10 million years ago, the line that would become gorillas split off. Then, a few million years later, around 7 million years ago, the most critical divergence happened: the split between the ancestors of chimpanzees and the ancestors of humans. By the time the epoch ended, our two lineages were on completely separate evolutionary paths.
So the chimpanzee and human lineages diverged by the late Miocene. While most apes went extinct due to climatic fluctuations and forest fragmentation, the newly emerged hominins, or the bipedal apes, thrived, setting the stage for their own major adaptive radiation in the subsequent Pliocene epoch. We will talk about them in the next video.